Hello everyone. In the mid-1990s, the city of New Orleans was plunged into a severe public safety crisis, earning the grim nickname, the murder capital of America. In the middle of that turmoil, a Vietnamese immigrant family believed that hiring a young policewoman as a security guard for their restaurant would make everything safer. But no one could have predicted that this trust would lead them into a tragedy, even more horrifying than an encounter with criminals, one that claimed 3 lives, including a police officer. The case shook the entire city, leaving both the Vietnamese community and local residents stunned not only by the brutality of the crime, but also by the true identity of the perpetrator. So what exactly happened and who was behind the massacre? The answers in the next part will challenge everything you thought you knew. If you think this is a story more people should know about, please leave a like and share the video. And don't forget to subscribe to Vietnamese Case Files to follow more gripping investigative crime stories. In the early hours of the 4th of March 1995, Xiao Vu, 23, and his younger brother Quoc Vu, 18, children of the owners of the Kim An restaurant, were cleaning up in the kitchen when a sudden burst of gunfire exploded from the dining area. Xiao could only shout a warning before instinctively dragging Quoc and sprinting toward the walk-in freezer, their hearts pounding in terror. The freezer door slammed shut behind them. Inside the darkness, both brothers held their breath, trying not to make a single sound. In those long, suffocating minutes, Xiao and Quoc could hear screams, crying, and angry shouts echoing from outside. Then came another barrage of gunshots, rapid, violent, forcing the brothers to cling to each other in fear. When silence finally fell, Xiao gathered his courage, cracked the door open, and the two crawled out into the dimly lit restaurant. The first thing they saw was a large pool of blood near the bar and the body of a police officer lying face down, his uniform soaked red. In the front kitchen, 2 motionless figures appeared under the weak light. Xiao rushed over, then collapsed, crying uncontrollably when he realized it was his older sister Ha Vu and his youngest sibling Quang Vu. Ha had already passed away on the floor. Quang was still alive, but barely breathing, lying in a widening pool of blood. Quoc immediately bolted out the back door, rushing to the neighbor's home for help. Within minutes, police received an emergency call and swarmed the scene. Paramedics confirmed that Ha Vu had died instantly, while Quang Vu was in critical condition with multiple gunshot wounds. He was rushed to the hospital, but sadly did not survive the trip. After sealing off the area, investigators began a meticulous examination of the crime scene. Spent shell casings and blood trails covered the ground. Behind the bar lay the body of the police officer later identified as Ronald A. Williams II. His duty holster was empty. His service weapon had been taken. In the cramped kitchen, Ha Vu's body was found in a kneeling, collapsed position, as if she had begged for mercy moments before her death. Nearby, loose cash was scattered on the floor, and the restaurant's safe had been forced open and emptied, supporting the early theory of a violent robbery. Because the crime occurred inside the family's restaurant, police quickly obtained information about the 2 civilian victims. Ha Vu, 24, and Quang Vu, 17, were siblings born into a hardworking Vietnamese immigrant family. Everyone who knew them described them as gentle, kind, and devoted to helping their parents run the business. That night, Ha and Quang stayed late to finish bookkeeping, planning to attend church with their family the following morning. Instead, that morning became their memorial service. Their deaths left a wound that no words could heal, and the entire Vietnamese community in New Orleans was shaken. The fallen police officer was Ronald A. Williams II. Williams served at District 7 of the New Orleans Police Department. Colleagues remembered him as a dedicated and promising young officer. His story was heartbreaking. Just 10 days before the incident, his wife had given birth to their second son. To support his growing family financially, Williams had taken an off-duty security shift at the Kim An restaurant that night. But in an instant, his bright future and the life he was building were stolen away, leaving behind a young widow and 2 children who never had the chance to know their father. While the investigative team was still reeling from the tragedy, Officer Antoinette Frank, who rotated shifts with Williams at the Kim An restaurant, suddenly appeared at the scene. She behaved strangely calm, approached the surviving witnesses to ask questions, and claimed that she had also been inside the restaurant when the gunfire erupted. Frank further stated that she had tried to lead the employees out through the back door, but Ha and Quang refused to run. leaving them trapped inside the kitchen. She added that she had driven back to the station to report the incident because she didn't have her police radio with her at the time. At first, Frank's presence offered some reassurance to her colleagues. They believed they now had a reliable insider witness. However, a seasoned officer quickly noticed inconsistencies in her account. If everything happened as Frank described, why would she need to drive back to the precinct to make a report when she clearly had access to a personal cell phone? Abandoning a fellow officer who was critically wounded and leaving 2 injured civilians behind to leave the scene was completely against police protocol. This raised a troubling question. Was Frank truly a witness, or was she directly involved in the crime itself? Then, as he regained his composure, Xiao Vu suddenly pointed at Frank and screamed, "She's the one who killed my siblings!" Everyone froze at the accusation. Frank was immediately restrained, disarmed, and handcuffed at the scene under serious suspicion. Right after Antoinette Frank was arrested, the direction of the investigation changed entirely. Police quickly concluded that this was not a random robbery, but a deliberate, calculated crime. Frank was transported to headquarters for overnight interrogation, while the restaurant was placed under full lockdown for forensic processing. Inside the Kim On restaurant, forensic teams discovered numerous 9mm shell casings scattered across the floor. Autopsy results later confirmed that the gunshot wounds on the victims all came from the same type of weapon, likely a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. There were no signs of significant struggle, suggesting the victims were ambushed at extremely close range and had no chance to fight back. The safe had been forced open and emptied of cash, yet other valuables remained untouched. This reinforced the theory that the perpetrator's primary objective was money, not random theft. While checking the restaurant's set of keys, the family was shocked to discover that one master key to the front entrance was missing. At this point, Xiao remembered, on the night of March 3, Frank and an unfamiliar young man had visited the restaurant twice to eat late-night food, then returned a third time around 2 a.m. On March 4, that time, Frank used a key to unlock the front door and storm inside. Xiao and Kwok managed to hide, which is why they survived. From their hiding spot inside the walk-in freezer, Xiao saw Frank still in full uniform enter with the young armed man. They demanded Ha and Kwong reveal where the money was kept. Chow also stated that Frank was the one who shot his younger brother Kwong after the cash had been taken. Additionally, Kwok Vu revealed that before Frank returned for the third time, Officer Williams had warned Chow to be careful because he recognized the man with Frank as a known criminal. Based on Chow's statement, police created a profile of the unidentified suspect, a young black male around 18 with a slender build. These details matched Rogers Joseph Lacaze, a local troublemaker, and Frank's rumored boyfriend. Records showed that Lacaze was a known drug distributor in the New Orleans East area. Police immediately launched a search for him. Before long, a critical lead emerged. 45 minutes after the murders, a credit card belonging to Ronald Williams was used to purchase fuel at a Chevron station in nearby Gretna. Surveillance footage captured a young black man driving an old Ford Torino, the same vehicle witnesses had seen leaving the restaurant. Following the card transaction, police quickly identified Lacaze's location near his brother's apartment. The task force moved in immediately and arrested him just hours after the crime. When handcuffed, Rogers Joseph Lacaze was still carrying the handgun and Ronald Williams's wallet. As for Antoinette Frank, she initially remained calm in the interrogation room, insisting on her innocence and repeating the claim that she had merely been present by coincidence and had fulfilled her duties as an officer. Eventually, under the pressure of mounting evidence, and especially after learning that Xiao Vu had directly accused her, Antoinette Frank broke down and was forced to confess. She admitted that she and Rogers Lacaze had carried out the robbery at the Kim On restaurant. Still, Frank attempted to shift the blame, claiming that Rogers put her up to everything. She also acknowledged firing shots at the Vu siblings, yet continued to deny killing Ronald Williams. Meanwhile, Rogers Lacaze denied firing any shots and pushed all responsibility onto Frank. It was clear both were trying to frame each other to avoid punishment. However, with overwhelming physical evidence and eyewitness testimony, police had more than enough grounds to charge both Antoinette Frank and Rogers Lacaze with 3 counts of first-degree murder. The investigation revealed that roughly 2 weeks before the robbery, Antoinette Frank had checked out a 9mm handgun from the police evidence room under the pretext of official duties, then later reported it stolen. Forensic specialists believed this weapon was likely the murder weapon, indicating the robbery had been planned in advance. On the night of the crime, Frank and Lacaze also stopped by a Walmart store to purchase a box of 9mm ammunition before heading to the Kim On restaurant. Frank casually wore her full police uniform during the purchase, showing no concern about drawing suspicion. In less than 48 hours after the murders, New Orleans investigators had effectively solved the case. The shocking truth that the perpetrator was a sworn police officer left not only the public, but even the police force itself in disbelief. What could drive a policewoman, someone sworn to uphold justice, to kill civilians and her own colleague? Let's look into the life and hidden psychological turmoil of Antoinette Frank to understand the tragedy that shaped her into a murderer. Antoinette Renee Frank, born in 1971 inches Opelousas, Louisiana, was once known as a young officer of the New Orleans Police Department. She grew up in an unhappy household. According to later released records, she endured severe emotional and physical distress throughout her childhood, including mistreatment from her father. That toxic environment appeared to leave deep psychological scars, contributing to the troubling personality traits Frank displayed as an adult. Despite her turbulent upbringing, Frank held on to the dream of becoming a police officer. As a teenager, she joined police explorer programs and applied to the New Orleans Police Department at age 20. However, red flags emerged during the application process. For example, Frank had been fired from a previous job but lied about it on her application. She also failed 2 standard psychological evaluations, both indicating poor emotional stability. In addition, she had once disappeared temporarily, leaving behind a distressing letter that caused her family to call police for help. Shockingly, despite all these warning signs, the New Orleans Police Department hired Frank in 1993 due to severe staffing shortages at the time. Colleagues described her as shy, indecisive, and often unsure of proper procedures. Supervisors had repeatedly considered sending her for additional training due to her inadequate performance. Even so, Frank knew how to build the image of a hard-working, dedicated officer. She was once awarded Officer of the Month by a local club for her involvement in community activities. More importantly, Frank was skillful at earning the trust of residents in the area she patrolled. The family who owned the Kim On restaurant was a prime example. Frank frequently visited the restaurant, chatting warmly with everyone, and even learning a few Vietnamese phrases to create familiarity. Over time, the Vu family saw Frank almost as a relative and hired her as a part-time security guard. No one suspected that this closeness was only a facade to exploit their trust. Rumors later suggested that Frank knew the Vu family often kept cash at the restaurant and had quietly planned her actions. According to colleagues and acquaintances, Frank had recently expressed resentment toward Ronald Williams, believing he was taking shifts and extra pay that she felt entitled to at the restaurant. Although this has never been fully verified, it appeared Frank harbored jealousy and personal animosity toward Williams. When financial motives mixed with personal grudges, they may have fueled her actions. Frank first met Rogers Joseph Lacaze on the night of the 25th of November 1994, when she responded to a shooting involving rival groups, during which Lacaze had been injured. Frank took responsibility for interviewing him, but instead of following proper procedures, she became entangled in an inappropriate relationship with the troubled young man. Born in 1976 to a poor family in New Orleans, Lacaze dropped out of school early and gravitated toward criminal activity, affiliating with illicit street groups. His own mother had expelled him from the house at age 17 after failing to stop his behavior. By age 18, Lacaze already had a record for violence and was known as reckless and dangerous. Initially, Frank believed she could help him change, but in reality, she became increasingly drawn into his lifestyle. Frank began secretly dating Lacaze, buying him clothes, a phone, and even renting a shiny Cadillac to impress him. Colleagues often spotted Lacaze sitting in the driver's seat of Frank's patrol car, a serious violation that she ignored because of her infatuation. According to investigative records, the pair committed several small robberies targeting drivers and pedestrians, using Frank's badge to stop vehicles while Lacaze took money. From the start, Lacaze seemed to understand Frank's emotional vulnerabilities and took full advantage. He fed her flattering words, making her believe she was in love. eventually turning her into the perfect accomplice for the crime planned for the night of March 3. Late that night, Frank put on her police uniform, carried the 9mm handgun she had borrowed from the evidence room, and drove a Ford Torino to pick up LaCaze. Around 11 p.m., the two stopped by the Kim On restaurant, pretending to be friendly regulars while observing the situation before leaving. Together they planned in the car, then went to Walmart to buy a box of 9mm ammunition in preparation for when the restaurant would be empty. Close to 1 a.m., Frank drove back to the restaurant. By then, the business had closed, leaving the 4 Vu siblings and Ronald Williams inside cleaning up. When Quoc Vu told her the restaurant was closed, Frank ignored him, used the stolen key, and unlocked the door, leaving everyone stunned. Williams approached to question her, but before he could respond, LaCaze suddenly pulled out a gun and fired. The officer collapsed immediately. The gunshots caused Xiao Vu and Quoc Vu to panic and run, hiding inside the walk-in freezer and closing the door. Unable to find them, Frank and LaCaze turned to the remaining 2 siblings, Ha Vu and Quang Vu, forcing them to reveal where the money was kept. Ha cried that she didn't know because Chow had stored it in the kitchen, while Quang tried to protect his sister. Growing impatient, Frank searched the area and eventually found the cash hidden behind rice sacks. Overtaken by greed, she raised her gun and fired at the 2 siblings. After confirming no one else appeared to be alive, Frank and LaCaze collected the cash and prepared to leave. Before exiting, LaCaze also took Williams's firearm and wallet from the counter. While escaping, Frank became furious at the possibility that Xiao and Quoc had survived. Despite LaCaze's objections, she decided to return to the scene to clean up. After dropping LaCaze off at a hiding place, Frank went back to the station, switched to another patrol vehicle, and drove back to the restaurant pretending she had just arrived to assist the investigation. She also carried a second firearm, intending to use it immediately if she encountered any witnesses. However, Frank's plan collapsed almost instantly. As soon as she arrived, police units had already reached the scene after receiving the emergency call from Xiao Vu and Quoc Vu. Unable to act in front of a crowd of fellow officers, Frank pretended to be shocked and quickly fabricated the story that she had just happened to be present at the scene. But the inconsistencies in her behavior were soon noticed, and combined with Shaw's direct accusation, Antoinette Frank was arrested shortly afterward. The case of Antoinette Frank and Rogers LaCaze quickly went to trial, drawing significant attention from the public in New Orleans as well as the Vietnamese diaspora. The Orleans Parish Court decided to separate the 2 defendants into independent trials to ensure fairness and impartiality. Rogers Joseph LaCaze was tried first in July 1995, since he was not a law enforcement officer and his case involved fewer sensitive issues. In court, LaCaze tried to deny responsibility, but the evidence against him was overwhelming and consistent. The jury found LaCaze guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder. The judge then sentenced him to death, making him one of the youngest inmates on death row in Louisiana at the time. By September 1995, the trial of Antoinette Frank began and drew even more attention than the previous one. Faced with indisputable evidence, Frank's defense team had little room to argue. Their sole strategy was to emphasize her troubled childhood in hopes of receiving a reduced sentence. However, the jury showed no sympathy and unanimously recommended the death penalty for Antoinette Frank. In court, Frank remained expressionless as the sentence was announced, showing no reaction or remorse. But the legal proceedings did not end there. After the trial, Frank's defense team filed numerous appeals over the years, presenting various arguments in an attempt to overturn or lessen the sentence. However, in 2007, the Louisiana Supreme Court rejected all appeals and upheld Frank's death sentence. Around the same time, Rogers LaCaze also filed appeals, but none of his efforts succeeded. What drew even more attention was that after Frank's conviction, another disturbing mystery about her slowly surfaced. In November 1995, a neighbor's dog accidentally uncovered human remains buried beneath the flooring of Frank's former residence. Examinations showed the skull had a gunshot defect and likely belonged to Adam Frank, Antoinette's father, who had been missing since 1993. At that time, Antoinette herself had reported him missing. Because Frank had already been sentenced to death, authorities did not pursue new charges. However, many investigators and members of the public believed she was responsible for her father's death, possibly as an act tied to long-standing trauma from her past. Since then, Antoinette Frank has remained incarcerated and is currently the sole woman on Louisiana's death row. She is confined in solitary housing at the Louisiana Correctional Institute for Women, living a quiet, isolated existence for nearly 3 decades. By 2023, Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards called for a mass clemency review for inmates on death row, including Frank, but the Pardon Board rejected all petitions due to procedural issues. In 2025, when the new administration under Governor Jeff Landry restarted executions, Frank unexpectedly filed a new appeal, citing lifelong trauma and mental health disorders. On the 15th of May 2025, the Orleans Parish Court granted her the right to a resentencing hearing scheduled for December 2025, opening a small possibility for her to escape the death penalty, although her murder conviction would still carry life imprisonment. The case of Antoinette Frank was not only a heartbreaking tragedy for the victims' families, but also a profound shock to society, as a police officer seen as a symbol of order and justice had become a cold-blooded killer. The media at the time described it as the case that shattered the spirit of a city already exhausted by crime. Public outrage surged, fueling demands for major reforms within the police department to restore trust in an institution whose reputation had been severely damaged. Indeed, after this case, the New Orleans Police Department initiated a sweeping internal reform. Recruitment procedures were overhauled, eliminating the policy of prioritizing local applicants who failed to meet standards, strengthening psychological evaluations, improving competency assessments, and enforcing stricter discipline across the force. Alongside these reforms, anti-corruption efforts were intensified to rebuild public confidence in the city's law enforcement. What do you think about the sentences in this case? Can the tragic past of an offender ever be considered a valid reason for leniency? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you've made it this far, don't forget to like, share the video, and subscribe to Vietnamese Case Files so you won't miss the many gripping cases we'll be uncovering next. Thank you for watching, and see you in the upcoming episodes.